Just the accepted? You got Filipino, you got...
That's what I mean. I'm actually meaning the whole,
Oh,
no, it's not just the whole, like, health and safety well-being of the community, I guess of the community. And that, I know that's a health issue as such, but it is a big issue across the district. It may be something, may not be.
Haven't we got that covered in our multicultural group and the different services that are already there?
They're there, but perhaps it's working with them all as one. I don't know, just a thought, maybe not.
Because in the work program, there is support for, new members to the community. There is the whole, can't remember what we called it now, but the whole program for migrant workers or immigrant workers and things like that. That is part of a existing program. It's not the major priority,
No.
but it is part of work.
So I guess it's already there.
I will say, Ali, that pretty obviously we're looking at this through a lens of 20% rate rise, and the appetite to extend. I'd have to say I will always look at it through the lens of a 20% rate rise.
I don't say it's probably not extending, it's just looking at.
Yeah, the point is that what they're doing is, the whole point was that the budget didn't change. This is the principle and the model we've always applied. The budget never changed. The point was we could decide how you were going to apply it, right? What you're going to focus on. Because remember when this whole thing came together, there's a whole bit of work that they do in relation to primary production and all that. But we've never said primary production was a priority, because we were focusing on other things and said primary production can be supported from our money, not from our money, but from there's plenty of other support mechanisms, right, at the time. That could change in 5 years' time or 3 years' time. But that's how we were doing it. And that's why we were focusing on filling out jobs, for example. It was saying, on your budget, out of your resources, focus on these areas. And it was never about increasing budgets to do more work. It was focus within what you're doing, current budgets, on these things. And we tell them.
So definitely the three on the right-hand side, the creating new jobs, the worker accommodation, and our living and working strategy. There's some weird things and the fast-moving dynamics that we're seeing. To give you an idea, like certainly the job numbers and the jobs have totally flipped, but it's quite new and there's something different happening. Our number one employee, to give you an idea, between MSD and Job Opportunities, will probably take 60 or 70 locals on. We're getting to the near the end of the employment season. We're at 1 and MSD is at 2. Something's happening. It's just too great. Worker accommodation, we went round last week. Old hospitals chock-a-block full. The camping grounds are full. The only accommodation we could find was Toko Mouth because we had a cold tap. The number of sleeping rough in the district I've never seen is great. So that's changing. So at the time when things have fallen off, that's picking up. And I still believe in an environment where we are looking at 20% rate increases. We cannot stop our belief in the living and working strategy. From a business plan, we need our population to grow. You think what a god-awful situation we'd be in if we were locked down at that 16,200 people at the moment. It would be untenable. So the balancing act between those three especially, it's changing so much that I think we have to look at the different balance for the group to do. But in all honesty, I was reading this at 1 o'clock last night after seeing it for the first time at 8 o'clock last night, so I haven't had too much time to put my head around it. But there's the changing dynamics and the fast changing dynamics should be reflected in the service agreement we have.
And just one thing what we could look at is that the other thing about the quality housing side of it, that's sort of matured quite a bit. I mean, the programs are in place, right? We've got known programs that are working. We've got known models and options that are working in that. So, the actual requirement on good development, for example, is almost more of a mechanic than that. And so it's possible you could shift, like, for example, work accommodation, you could say let's shift the emphasis to creating new jobs and worker accommodation off the quality housing bit, because basically those programs are in place. Perhaps that's an option.
Wouldn't like to turn our back on that either, but, Son,
Yes, through your worship, you mentioned the district's biggest employer again. At the moment, that plant down there is obviously functioning very well. And so the jobs are full. I'm not sure whether there's going to be more. So I'm just talking from a farming point of view, that the function of it and moving stock in there has worked better than it has in a long time this year. It might be post-COVID sort of thing. But I'm guessing with the livestock numbers disappearing in the district, the plant going well, that you're not going to see more jobs come out of Finnegan. And therefore that brings into question as to whether you really want to go down that track of encouraging and looking at that worker accommodation. I'm just not sure if it's going to be required. There's clearly a lot of migrant workers in, and perhaps that's the reason why it's actually going so well.
the dichotomy is the double banger that we've got more people, the vulnerability around our accommodation is increasing, or something is happening for the need for our workers. But from a wider economic perspective, if immigrants are being bussed in from Mosgiel and bussed back out the minute after they finish work, from a local economic perspective, broader, but that's another discussion. Councillor Finch.
Thank you. I'm looking at every night on the news, you see how many people are losing their jobs and what is happening. And it's not just happening in one area, it's happening New Zealand wide. So we're going to have more people coming to look for jobs as that goes on. And as we know, we are in a recession. And there's going to be more and more people looking for jobs. So I think that part of it, creating new work and the accommodation, all those things to me are really tied up and really, really vitally important from now on. I think that's a major thing, and working within our community as they do with all the different groups and that, to be able to avoid all those that are living rough. We need to really get behind that type of thing as far as I can see.
Other comments, questions?
Any additions? Otherwise, that will be fine.
Councillor Martin.
I tend to agree with Councillor Ludeman. Under the possibilities column there, the worker accommodation, and I don't know why the emphasis, as Councillor McAtamney says, about the major employer of Balclutha, but the districts, our districts' biggest employer is our primary industry, which is made up of agricultural contractors and agricultural service providers who rely heavily on transient staff, whether they're from the UK or North Island or Australia or wherever, and they need temporary accommodation for these people through those seasons. So I think there could be a lot of work done with the primary industry sector, with the service providers, on what are their strengths and weaknesses, how can we help as a council to support those primary industries. And I think that is a great way to start. And the second thing was what Alison brought up, around the cultural inclusivity of the district. We're lacking a lot of it. Council may have a lot of services that they're funding there to provide for them, but what services do we as a council fund, and how well are they being utilised? And are they being utilised? And I'll go back to this document. It's all in front of you. Have a good read, and you will see the district as a whole's issues in here. You won't have to go too far to find out.
Right, Your Worship. I mean, we were just looking for, whether there was anything out of the blues that was new, gives us an ability to go and do something with it, and that was the intention only, Your Worship.
There was mention here of the what's that? The fund 180K. Destination management, that's not to be discussed now, or?
No, Your Worship, no, it was just shown, I mean, it was, we provided you the existing SLA,
Yeah.
service agreement, which just had whatever it had. But no, we are talking about the pure economic development side.
So have we got, I think it's recommendations, which. Right,
No,
so
we've done the
achieved-
outcomes,
we've
yes,
achieved the
So
outcomes.
we've done that.
Is that, councillor Payne?
Thank you, Worship. Look, I'm just mindful that whatever we decide here, we need to be prepared to back as a council as well. And so we need to choose very carefully.
Yeah, I know,
And get these priorities 100% right.
Well, the next step,
Because I think we failed miserably on that case.
the next step though, which I didn't say, would be that we can give those sort of directions of travel to Linda and her team. And what they do is they'll come back and say, here's how they would be proposing to deliver. And that, so there's more detail around what's been proposed, because you'll see in the service level agreements, there's some specific actions of bits and pieces. So there's still work to be done around that, but it gives them an idea around, well, okay, if this is the area of travel, what are the potential things we could be doing? And that work is yet to be done. So it just gives them that.
And also the opportunity is still there to change, because as I said, this is 12 hours fresh in my head. I would prefer to have had a far longer look at it. So I wouldn't like to say that it's locked and loaded today.
Well, no, there's a couple of two different things. One is you've still got to go through your consultation process around what you want to do. But it did remind me, and I might as well say it now because it's valid for everything, is that with us going into the consultation process and that, before we get to hearings, and then you've got 2 days for decisions, we really want direction from you at some point in terms of areas of activity, expenditure activity, that you want us to look at and bring to the decisions, right? Because the last thing we want is get to decision time and out of the blue, you come up with some major change you want that we have no ability to do the homework for you, and that. And if you advise us areas that you are interested in, it could be any, all of you are different, you could have different areas. We will endeavour to do our best to do the homework on those areas that you want brought into the decision making, so that at least then you can, we can bring that paperwork to you and you can look at it and you can make the calls correctly. So it works, that's the intent. So, if someone between now and that sort of time frame said, I really want to look at economic development, then that's fine. As long as we know in advance, we can do the homework and say what happens if you don't have economic.
But now is the appropriate time.
Well, we will ask you, it's a good heads up that I'm giving you now. We'll make that more formalised so that we can get an idea of what you're talking about, and that. Because otherwise you don't make informed decisions, do you? Because you say, I'm proposing to cut this, and you vote on it, and there's no ability for us to tell you what the impacts of that are. So we would prefer you to say, I'm interested in this activity area, I really want to hone down on it for whatever reason, and we will go and give you all that information as part of the research we do for your decision, and then go from there. And then at the end of the day, those are your decisions, which is fine.
Councillor Catherwood.
Through you, Your Worship. So Steve, touching base on that then, so 24-25 economic development budget's coming in near on 810,000, and you go on that breakdown of the 21-22 after your core funding, your service level agreement speaks. You meaning like, see, and he has got that on page 7, bullet point 7.3, destination management marketing was 180,000, obviously of the budget of 700,000. Are you wanting direction from us today of saying, well, this is the budget because it can only go so far? Or
No. What I'm saying to you is that between now and decision date, or a week before decision date, when we have to write reports and get agendas to you. So, you know, for your decision, 2 days of decisions, which we've got scheduled for, right?
Yeah.
What I would like to see is if any councillor has a particular area, like you've used the word yourselves, slash and burn, right? If any councillor has areas that they wish to consider for slash and burn, I would like to have that so that we can do the homework for you and tell you the consequences of that particular item of slash and burn. Because I'm trying to explain, the last thing you want is sitting down on that 2-day point and you're saying, let's remove this whole activity, and we have no ability to tell you the consequences of removing that activity, right? So that's all we're asking for, because that way you make an informed decision, and then if you do, I have no complaints because you're doing it based on information.
So example, Steve, is if I came to you and said we get rid of community housing, put it out to the private, instead of holding it in council, is that what you mean?
Yes, although you might explain it a different way and say, I think we seriously need to look at community housing and that side of things, even to the extent of exiting. And you go, right, okay, well, we can put that, park it aside and say, let's do some homework, because then we would say, well, we'll do some work on that side, right?
Councillor Barron, followed by Catherwood, followed by Mackie.
Through you, the service agreement that we've been given for today is 2022, and it adds up to 702,000, 462, 60 and 180.
Yes.
But the budget for the general charge is 802,000, $100,000 more.
Yeah, because that's the, I believe, without looking at it, it's the total activity. So there's more than just inclusive development in the total activity costs, right? And it
Economic
doesn't.
development.
It doesn't include, because you took it out, destination management. That's not in there in the budget this time. So whatever the total activity amount is listed for economic development in that thing, doesn't include destination management because we removed it off the baseline. But it is more than just inclusive development. So there is other activities.
Under economic development, there's more than, so it's still 702 to economic development.
Well, actually, it'll be 702 minus the destination management because that's not in there.
Well, in the LTP, there's another 195,000 asked for in the LTP. The funding is not provided for destination management activities. The initiative could not carry on. Continuing this initiative will involve an additional cost of 195,000 per annum.
That's correct. That's because we removed it out.
So does that replace the 180 that's in this agreement?
If it would relate to destination management, it does. Yes. So it was funded, right? So it was funded differently. It was always been funded by investment surplus. It's never been rate funded.
Yep.
We wanted to rate fund it, but then we removed it.
Yep.
It's no longer there. It's in the LTP because it's just a question. Do people have an interest in it or not?
From investment surplus.
Yes.
But the agreement that the council has with the economic development is only the 462 and the 60. Is that what we're saying?
Oh, well, don't forget the funding doesn't run out until June the 30th. So you have funded destination management to June 30th.
Which is the 180. Okay. Yes. So it's 702. I'm just trying to work all this out, but this 802 is not just economic development.
It's not just
other
inclusive
things.
It's not just inclusive,
Not-
it's just not inclusive development, it's economic development, but it's inclusive development and other areas that are pushing
Yeah, so
us.
it's not broken down. So ideally, the economic, the 702 is inclusive development, and there's another 100,000 for something else. Yeah? No?
No, because if you're speaking 800,000 for the LTP, right? And then you're referring to what the SLA had, and that the SLA included destination management, but The 800 does not include destination management. So it wouldn't be correct to say it's 700 inclusive development out of the 800.
Right, 462 and 80.
No,
Now I'm even more confused.
no, I'm even
No,
more
no,
confused.
Sorry, you're next, yeah.
So then, yeah, because I am a bit confused. I wouldn't mind a little bit more clarification on it then. Just then, it would be 462. There'd be agreed projects. If you're spending 810,000 minus the 462, which is your service level agreement, where do we get the breakdown of where the remaining balance is spent?
Okay, well, Sharon could get to the detail of what the difference is, but the majority is the big funding bit
Yeah.
is the,
462,
yeah, plus the project funding, which was
60.
60 or whatever that figure is now.
Yeah.
And that's it for inclusive development, right? For the LTP, because we haven't funded the destination. And then the difference will be other things that are being charged against economic development. And Sharon might have a better idea of the specifics of what might be charged over and above that to economic development. Can you help us out, Sharon, about what additional things?
280,000.
Excuse me, there'll be overheads in here as well. But I'll run a report now and see what else, what other line items I have.
So councillor Mackey followed by Sam.
I suppose I'm going backwards, but I was looking at that workers' accommodation up there, and perhaps some of like Silverfern Farms when I left school, it had a kitchen, it had working single man's quarters. They were responsible for employing people and looking after them accommodation wise. If you look at the schools and the districts, they had their own accommodation for their teachers to stay in. Clifton had 2 houses and a set of flats. Perhaps the responsibility needs to be put back on these organisations, not the council picking it up. And these people that are running Living Rough, there's some mental health problems that are there, that the state, that, you know, the mental health system's severely broken, that needs to be fixed.
Yes, I mean, as worship will tell you, I'll tell you that we have not succeeded at getting industry support for worker accommodation. And you're right, historically there had been, and we've talked about that, but there isn't worker support. The education of selling houses. The houses here have been sold.
Yeah.
And others are being more proactive, like the doctors or Luther Health or something like that are trying to get houses to be able to make that. You know, we were looking at that as well. But yes, the main industry players haven't been good at that, which is why we're saying it's an area that needs to be looked at.
So you're transferring it onto the ratepayer then?
Oh, no. Our living and working things have never, all our housing is not rate funded. It's all cost neutral, yes, thanks. Everything's cost neutral. So if you ventured into worker accommodation, the argument would be that you're moving to cost neutral models, and you wouldn't do it unless you could prove that it was a cost neutral arrangement.
Just from myself through to you, Sharon. Over the years, might have been 15,000 for Mayor's Task Force. And a bygone day, when I was thinking economic development, can you just check whether it's there or somewhere else? And just as long as everyone else is in agreement, I no longer need it. We get job opportunities money now. So if there is 15,000 there for Mayor's Task Force support, I don't need it.
It's not in this costing, but I can tell you what it is now, so just have a look. There's 28,000 for the Cruiser Gold Trail. There's 90,000 for 3 different information centres, which also goes to that cost centre. 23,000 for district brochure and 60,000 ODs.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. Cruiser Gold Trail, there's 28,000.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's
And
fixed
information
agreement.
centres, there's 3 information centres in Milton, Alliance and Kowaka, and they all get, well, they get different amounts, but it combines to a total of 90,000. There's a budget for the district brochure that's at 23,000. And there's 60,000 of overheads, which is their share of the cost of running the business. And that's actually based on the 23-24 year.
It's 90
Has to be.
Righto, team,
to 80.
have we crystallised it? Sorry, councillor.
Can I have one more question?
Yeah.
Linda, is she here? Hey. Linda, how many staff have you got in your team? 5. And there's,
Not all doing economic development though, because we have other contracts.
is there 11 executives? Are they board members?
Yes,
And do they get paid
a minimal $100 a meeting fee.
for a meeting? Okay, thank you.
We meet 6 times a year.
Councillor Catherwood.
Probably for Sharon. So then Sharon, you just sort of mentioned that there's 90,000 for 3 info centres. That's combined with 90. And then is it the eyesight? That's just for the eyesight then of 344 coming up?
Correct.
Just for the Balcliffe eyesight?
Yeah, excuse me, and the info centre grants is referring to aren't council-owned information centres, probably badly named. It'll be like for Olaf, it'll be the museum, the Maiden Museum, yes. And in Lawrence, they've got a separate information centre, museum area, and buildings the same. So those, but that 90,000 is not council-run facilities.
Okay. Okay, team, where are we at? Finished up?
Yep.
Done and dusted, we don't need to go back to the recommendations, I think it's clear where we are, so thank you for that, team.
Now, I'm mindful that you're still wanting to have some
Yeah.
councillor time at the end. Jules, we were, the
No,
idea.
I think we can do this, because I had that one in the back of my mind, well, it's just information.
I was going to suggest to make sure that our people understand that we're only looking at it from the information side, so we don't want to take a lot of time from our perspective.
Yeah.
Right? And introducing it, so that's fine.
So if we move on to the wastewater, and I will say right from the start, obviously, she's been a huge day, so we want to be focused. I thought it was a good initial information dump, so that we've got the subliminal knowledge, shall we say, of it. It didn't give me specifics, but then maybe right at this time I don't want specifics because we're loaded up in every other direction possible.
We did it.
So
Sorry, councillor, if you're asking about PowerPoints, the information was part of was in the agenda. There's a lot of slides, so we didn't want to, and they were basically just repeating what's in the thing, so we didn't produce copies for you.
So, Jules, are you going to go through the slides?
No,
No.
I'm not going to. Nico spent a lot of work doing the slides, but he's
Yeah.
got a bit of a cough, so I wasn't going to get him to speak anyway. Just really all I wanted to touch on was that we haven't done a very good job engaging with iwi about where we're heading with the wastewater treatment. We started some work last year. You've had a copy of the report, which I was pleasantly surprised. Some of the areas weren't as big as I thought they were going to be. One of the key factors with this will be engaging with iwi, agreeing about how these systems are going to work in our district. Because the philosophy is not, there is never going to be any runoff off these areas. If we get rain like we have today, we're going to have to stop irrigating, for example, but we're not proposing to have massive amounts of storage. What we've done is this at a high level to engage with councillors and with our iwi partners and say, where are our priorities? Where are we going to work to improve our discharges? And what are we going to do to look at land treatment as an option versus really intensive treatment systems? So those that came on the iwi tour, you would have had a copy of the initial report. We haven't gone to the level of detail of what's the solution in every location, because part of the next step is actually doing that engagement and say, what are the priorities for us moving forward? We've got 3 plants that currently are going to be expiring in terms of their consents in the next 10 years. So we have to look at those, but I personally think there's other plants, other discharges in our district that should be a higher priority than some of those. One of them is Lawrence. We've got a receiving environment you'd be lucky if it's even 2 metres wide. But that's part of us having a look at our program, having a discussion with iwi and potentially with the Otago Regional Council as well. So I'm more than happy afterwards, once you've had a look at the presentations as well as the report, if you want to have a chat with a bit more detail, but really wanted to set the scene to say what we really need to do over the next 12 to 24 months is really get stuck into this work area, look at what we're going to be doing, and try and really refine some of those what are quite horrific costs in our 10-year long-term plan for some of our wastewater treatment. And we're hoping we can work together and reduce some of those costs and not be looking at expensive treatment systems, but actually look to do some, or hopefully a reasonable areas of land-based treatment to tick a bunch of boxes at a cheaper cost than putting in treatment plants and continuing to discharge to waterways. So that was about it.
But you might also mention that when you talk about the plants, there's 3 consents, isn't it, that require us to look at this sort of a process, isn't it?
They do, and to be perfectly honest, if we can't make our other consents compliant, we've got to look at those too, because that's the only option we have if we can't get them compliant is to look at applying for a new consent. And when we do that, first thing we're going to say is, what is your option for a land-based treatment system? So that's why this is really important to do for all of our systems. And who knows, the national environmental standards might change. The priority of Te Mana o Te Wai has been signalled by the current government. It's not going to be the #1 priority moving forward. If you've read the paper, you would have seen there's some discussions between the Minister and the Otago Regional Council about notification of their plan. The draft that they've put together requires no discharges to lakes or rivers by 2040. So that's all heading in this direction. We'll see what happens on it, but that's a lot of uncertainty around what's going to happen at a national and a regional level. But we really need to be doing this work to say, how are we going to be moving forward? Now, one other key thing I will say is that all the upgrades we're doing at the moment, that's been factored into this work to say, right, this is the effluent we're going to be getting from these plants if you're meeting your current consent conditions. We think we can pick this up, and these are the land areas you're going to need. So there's not treatment we're doing now, which we're expecting to have to either significantly change or throw out if we're going to move towards down a land-based treatment system moving forward. So, yeah, didn't want to go through the whole presentation, but Nico spent a lot of work, so please have a look at it. And,
Nico, we have had a look at it, and my apologies, she's a blitzer, but it will work. Can we do?
yeah, absolutely.
Questions? So,
Happy days.
questions from me, when I read through it, it was the individual plants with individual solutions, whereas I had thought, Balclutha, Stirling, Kaitankana, maybe even Kaka Point. Are we going to take that next step of, or even Milton and Waihola?
That's going to be the discussion with iwi too, because there's going to be pretty substantial cost to pipe some of this effluent around. And do we want to have one really big treatment area near Balclutha, or do we want to have smaller ones around the place? Because we're going to have to weigh up that cost of piping versus Here, it's a prime example. It will be very expensive to pipe here to Tapanui. And when you look at the maps, there's really good soil right beside or within a short distance of the Heria wastewater plant. So that's going to be part of those wider discussions of what's the philosophy of that we want to do moving forward.
Especially when there's a farmer just up the road that's going to give us land.
So that's certainly an option. And our iwi partners have said we want you to look to combine these discharges together. But if we are going down a path of land treatment, that might be more agreeable to have some smaller ones close to save some of those piping and storage costs potentially.
Gaynor followed by Simon.
So on page 1, under Waihola, it's got Milburn and Milton. And you've got 5 kilometre arc southwest of the Milburn wastewater treatment plant. So is that a new one going in?
It depends on what happens with the Milburn development. So as part of the structure plan that they put together, they did say that the initial demand for that Milburn wastewater area was probably 4 times the size of the current Milburn plant. If that was the case, it made sense for them to do their own treatment on that site. That's also a really key issue of, and we flagged this to the developer, this stuff's not going to happen quickly. You can't come to us and say in 12 months' time we want to start operating in that area. You're going to have to be engaging with us, and we're going to have to be looking at what the wastewater solution is if there's going to be a development there that's going to require a significant amount of waste treatment. So it's a lot more than what Milton's currently doing.
Yes, and that was going to be my follow-up question then. So it's not going to be our ratepayers that have to fund that.
That's not the intent. It should be covered by the developer.
Thank you.
But they've got to figure out a few years before they need it.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Simon.
Yeah, through your worship, Jules, what I'm curious about is the numbers for all these treatment plants, I think it's 9 potential projects have all gone into the long-term plan. You must have a breakdown there of the estimates of the land purchase prices for.
So what's actually gone into the plan is, it's not for a land treatment system, it's for a very sophisticated treatment plant and continuing with the river discharge. I think the label says land treatment or significant upgrade. So we used some work that the DIA did to calculate a really stringent, plants to meet really stringent standards. So
That's the long-term plan.
yeah, and the work we need to do is, what are those costs versus actually the land treatment?
Yeah. So I just took those that weekend after the iwi tour, been bored on a Sunday afternoon, and I started going through each of those areas and trying to put a bit of an estimate on what that land might be worth. But then you get into all these complicated scenarios of say, hey, you might only need 5 hectares here, but it's the primo paddock in area, and the landowner goes, hey, look, you've got to buy the whole 50 hectare block off me. It's a pretty complicated.
There's all those things. It's like Waihola.
Yeah.
There is land close to it, but potentially it would be better to pump it over the hill, so that way, where it is being discharged, it's not going back into the wetland system. So those are parts of the detail of looking at each one. But
But they're going to be pretty hard to ever estimate those costs, because those land purchase things, and you're not going to necessarily get the land you want.
that's going to be part of the working through the solution for each site.
Yeah.
And those negotiations with landowners.
It's not going to make the budgeting easier anyway. I know that in the future.
John, followed by Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks, Jules. And just to help me understand, so if hypothetically we can actually meet discharge consents for a particular plant, this won't be forced on us in time, or will be?
Well, there's 3 plants where the consents are expiring within the 10 years, so we have to do that within that period.
If we can make them compliant to discharge to water, we don't have to go down this path?
If the current regional plan goes through the way it is, we would be hard pressed to not move to land treatment.
So second thing is, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but hypothetically we do that with this particular plant and we're discharging the land. Can that land be used for like cropping or some other, like if you're discharging the effluent to that, can that land be still productive for some other reason used?
That is what land is being used for elsewhere. There are some potential fish hooks with market perception, but that's why one of the options is a subsurface irrigation system. So it's only the roots, and then you do a cut and carry and you make baleage and you sell that off the stock. So there can be fish hooks with that, but that's how it's working in other places.
In New Zealand?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, Tiana.
Michelle.
John sort of asked part of the question. Also I don't know, working down the track, I suppose, you may not have to buy the land.
Most places where they do this, they buy the land and lease it back to the farmers that they bought it off.
Oh, I see, not the other way around, pay the farmer to have it go on them.
Probably the investment risk.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're major investment and you don't own the land, might be a problem.
Look, we'd be open to whatever, but we do know in other situations when there's human effluent being applied to land, there's market perception issues for that being used for potentially, depending on how it's irrigated and all those sorts of things as well. So that's what we have to work through with each individual situation.
In the wider picture, Jules, it seems to me so much of the wider 3 pictures is how much we load up in debt before the inevitable debundling of this problem. We've got 3 plants, you say, in the next 10 years. Waihola, Balclutha and Clinton. What are the dates?
They're in the presentation.
Yeah.
I think it's 27 for 2. We've got 7-year consents for Clinton and Waihola, and we've got a 10-year consent or 9-year consent.
So if either Kamanatawai got downgraded, or Justin Tipper definitely said that from a iwi Māori perspective that they would consider pulling back on the discharge to land because they realise it's going to tip their people over the financial cliff as well. If they dropped, how much could we pull out of our 10-year plan? If they just go ahead and back down the river it goes, Is that a solution that's gonna take the noose off around our neck, or won't it really be there to say?
There is a lot of wastewater upgrade money in the budget. It's well over $100 million.
That we would save?
Well, I don't think we would get away with doing nothing. We would still have to do something, and it might be another upgrade or whatever. But remember, the dates are up there. I mean, our long-term consents don't expire until 45, 46 and 49. But
If the amount that we could save if it dropped down, is that the cavalry coming through? And it sort of is, but there's still
probably some upgrades required, but not to that extent.
Councillor Martin.
Jules, just like so out of Harriet and Clinton, our smaller communities, the septic tank's not an option. Like, so septic tanks versus major infrastructure, like, and we're going to be dealing with iwi, like.
I'd be very surprised if anyone would be prepared to have a septic tank put back on their property and a disposal field for effluent on their property. Because it ends up, you just got to go to Punawera when it's a rainy event. And you know people are walking through their effluent sometimes when it's really wet. We've had surveys done 20 years ago that showed that was an issue at Punawera.
At Punawera, but I'm talking about Clinton and Harriet.
But they just...
So like, has anyone ever explored that option? Is the question.
No.
And then to measure what the cost savings could be.
Because it wouldn't meet our rules for having those sorts of on-site discharges on 600-700 occasions, and some of them are quarter-acre sections. So, you've got the cost of putting in a disposal field nowadays, it can be 20 grand without the septic tank. So the costs would be really expensive to go and retrofit septic tanks in all areas and dig up everybody's backyard. I know what it costs us just when we put a stormwater thing through and we've got to replace driveways and that sort of thing. So it would be pretty horrific, I'd imagine. Brett.
So Jules, going back to Clinton there's been quite a lot of work done at the Clinton sewage ponds in the last, it started before Christmas, but it's sort of at a bit of a standstill. I see, so when that work's completed, is it still not going to be compliant? Like you've spent about 170,000 there so far this year.
More than that,
hundreds of thousands. That was a figure I saw and I thought, surely you've spent more than that. So
that's we're doing this current work to get it compliant for our current consent conditions. Those are the short-term consent conditions to take us through that date. And our argument at the time was, we're not spending $10 million on these for you to give us a 6 or 7 year consent. If we're going to spend that sort of money, we need a 25-year to 30-year consent, at least. 35 is the maximum you can get under the RMA. There's not much being given for 20 years. We were pretty lucky when we got 35-year consents for all of our previous systems. But yeah, 20 to 25 would be a long-term consent nowadays.
Thanks, Your Worship. Look, I'd be really interested to explore the opportunity of amalgamating some of these and what that looks like. And I guess that's going to be all worked through too, is it, Jules? Because, the obvious one that comes to mind is probably Stirling and Kaitangata, for example. They're reasonably close, despite them doing too much. You've only got one plant then, your consenting's less, blah, 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 blah.
There is, if you look through the capital projects, there is a connection from Stirling to Belfluther in the budgets.
Yeah.
For wastewater. We took the water one out, but the wastewater one is there.
Still there.
Yep. And I think that's absolutely something we need to explore. But I think that would be part of those discussions with iwi and with the ORC as well. Like if there's heaps of really good land near Belfluther, we could pipe Kaitangata and Stirling relatively cost effective. But it might cost us half of as much again to pipe it as it would be to just find some land around Kaitangata.
But operationally, it might be less going forward as well. So
that's
the swings and roundabouts.
Yep. And the whole point of this work is not to actually find the solution, but actually have the information to start the discussion, and we find the solution together.
Can we exhaust the questions? Firstly, sorry for the expurgated report. Thank you, Jules. Thank you, team.
The job.
Yeah, we've got the information and it's a work.
We can end the workshop.
Yeah, that ends the workshop. Councillors know that we now flick back into the councillor only time where we've got the opportunity to speak